woman the other day. She asked, "What do you do?" "Do you have all night?" I asked her back. "This'll take more than a minute or two." So I spewed out everything I know about music, the mind, and the brain. But she looked a bit tired and she started to drift. So I just let loose and sang, "Hello, Cheryl, it's nice to meet you. Oh, Cheryl, get ready to sing. Oh, Cheryl, it's good to be with you. You have something very special to bring. You see, my friend Cheryl, I'm proud to be a woman who practices music therapy, a behavioral science that's evidence-based. Since I passed my board exams, I can work any place, from the old folks at the nursing home, the young ones at school, and those who have difficulties following rules, those with special needs, those who are hospitalized, and even those who just need me to hear them cry. Premature babies to hospice care, music reaches therapeutic goals everywhere. I hope you've enjoyed this long, long list of clients who work with music therapists. Are you still with me, Cheryl? There's much more to say, like how music interventions transform lives every day. I have a song for Mackenzie that helps her relax, so she can stay calm while getting that shot in her back. I have a drum for Dakota that I play on his arm. The vibrations, they tickle, but he learns touch won't harm. I have a scarf for Abby that she waves in the air. She expresses herself even when people are there. I have a tambourine for Jacob that he plays for the group. It shows him there's still something good he can do. Oh, Cheryl, I'm so glad you asked me what I do. I'm sure you're feeling the same way too. I can see you're getting tired of my singing and my playing. I'll just wrap it up by saying GOODBYE. I'm glad I got to tell you all about music therapy. So I wrote that song when I was a student in music therapy school. Thank you. It was for a scholarship opportunity, and it was an advocacy piece to tell people what the heck is this music therapy thing. Obviously today I'm focusing on music therapy and end-of-life care. Thank you to Valerie for advocating for this program here at Lakeside. We truly hope and believe that music therapy, in addition to our other services, will be an added layer of supportive care for our patients and their families, and hopefully a new marketing edge as well. So today, flipping to the next slide here, we'll talk about music therapy. What the heck is it? How does one become a music therapist, specifically in hospice care? Talk about some related literature. I'm going to share with you patient projects, legacy projects, things that people have left behind, audio recordings, songs for their family to cherish even after the patients have passed. That's my favorite part of the presentation because it really gives you a glimpse of what this program can add for people. And then I'll talk about how I can be part of the interdisciplinary team and how we can support one another. So music therapy, going to the next slide again, is the clinical and evidence-based use of music interventions to accomplish individualized goals. So one has to be a board-certified music therapist serving the client with a specific need in order for something to be considered music therapy. So music therapists, once we meet our patients, we do an assessment. We want to find out what music's going to be most therapeutic, right? So preferred music. Your preferred music is not going to be the same as your preferred music. Something that makes Ashley relax might make Walter go out of his mind, right? I was once doing a typical progressive muscle relaxation group with a group of outpatient oncology patients. And 4 out of 5 of them said this was amazing. I haven't felt this relaxed in a month. The other one was like, girl, I need polkas to relax. That's what gets me going because it meets me where I'm at, and then I can stop thinking about all the other things. That's how fast it is in my head. So what's preferable and therapeutic for one person is not for the other. And finding out patient preference. What is their musical background? Do they play an instrument? Are there family dynamics? Are there other supportive care goals like verbal processing that need to happen that I can help with? So seeing exactly what the need is, coming up with a treatment plan, ongoing evaluation. Is this working? Is it working for the interdisciplinary team? Is it helping the patient and family? And then, of course, documenting. We are always expected to chart in the patient chart about how it's being received, if indeed it is beneficial. Moving along to the board certified music therapist slide. So what does it take to become a music therapist? A 4-year degree in music therapy. And so within that coursework is music performance, music history, music theory, we're trained musicians as well as trained supportive care professionals. So we have courses in psychology and we have field placements, working under a board certified music therapist in geriatric settings, working with people of developmental disabilities, both children and adults, inpatient and outpatient psych. Some people have the opportunity, if schools are in proximity to hospitals, that have music therapists in some hospices. My experience in hospice as a student was solely volunteering for a hospice agency in the area. In order to maintain our board certification, we have to complete a 6-month internship before we can even sit for the boards. So after our 4 years of coursework, we do a 6-month internship under the supervision of a board certified music therapist. That's full-time. If we successfully complete that, then we sit for the boards. And it's a 3-hour test that is really tough. I thought it was really tough. When a lot of your skills are music and then you're doing this computerized test. I never want to have to take it again. Every 5 years you have to do that or have 100 continuing education credits. So I always choose that route because I love to learn the new techniques that are out there, the new research that's out there, and so on. Things do change. As we know, science and neuroscience, things that we know about music and the brain, it's always changing. So to become a hospice music therapist, it's an additional 130 hours of coursework and field work. I was fortunate enough that after my internship in a hospice agency, they hired me on as a full-time music therapist and funded my hospice certification. And it was fantastic. So it was through the Center for Music Therapy and End-of-Life Care. We did a hospice and palliative care overview, learning the business side, the marketing side, learning how to do a proposal, like to start a program somewhere, and then getting in the field again, working with patients, using specific hospice techniques. Grief and loss is another course that is part of the certification. So we're trained in working with people through bereavement. I worked for 4 summers in a row at a children's bereavement camp as a music therapist and direct counselor. And then we also had a counseling skills course within the hospice certification. So people who want to do that can pay or be funded to do so. I felt called to hospice music therapy pretty early on. You'll hear more about that throughout the presentation. We will have a time for questions and conversation at the end. So if I don't cover something, feel free to talk then. So if you flip to the goals of hospice music therapy page, I want to know from your perspective as caregivers and hospice staff, what are some of the greatest needs you see in our patients and families?
I think at nursing homes, isolation and sadness.
Yeah, I was going to say attention.
I think it's just the anxiety of what's to come. They don't know what to expect and what's happening or what's normal and what's not. Not that there's a normal, but just that anxiety, they don't know what to expect.
A lot of people that I talk to they're overwhelmed with all this stuff, and there's nothing good going on in their lives often. So having something that's not in this scheduling this thing or worrying about that thing or am I making the right choice kind of onslaught of new stuff, like a nice thing within that to look forward to.
Yeah, for sure. So you'll see in this list of goals of hospice music therapy, decrease, distract from pain or agitation, using something called the ISO principle, which I'm going to demonstrate very soon. Opportunities for choice and control. When we see patients at this phase of life, they don't have much choice or control left of a lot of things, right? It's kind of refreshing if you offer a music therapy or come in for your scheduled visit and they say no, even that's empowering, right? Like, there's no harm in not accepting the music visit, but maybe it's just another person checking in with them that day. Or if they do say, yeah, stay, what kind of music do you want to hear? Do you want to play or do you want to passively engage in it? Do you want this genre or that genre? Guitar, keyboard, do you want to, there's a lot of choice within a music session, and I find that empowering too. Verbal processing, showing people what they're still capable of doing, like in the song, good old Jacob playing his tambourine. We have things like this adaptive pick for people who don't have maybe the fine motor skills to pluck anymore or finger this like small pick, right? There's something called the easy chord that I'm waiting to arrive. You can put it for guitarists over like these 4 bars here, and it's just shapes, big buttons that you can just press with a flat finger if you have the strength at least to do that. It's pretty easy, but it forms the chord of basic songs. So there are adaptive instruments and equipment out there to set people up for success if they still want to play instruments. Meaningful socialization, we see this in nursing homes a lot, right? Somebody shows up with a guitar and everybody flocks towards them. Patient can't get out of the room, you see like a crowd around the door when we're playing. Certainly is a huge part of isolation goals. Family cohesion. A lot of families don't know what to do with their loved ones anymore at the end of life. And so to bring music and have them gather in a living room or in a space around that. Spiritual uplifts. Maybe some of you even have a faith practice or religion. A lot of them are directly related to music, right? Music's a big part of people's faith experience. Active music making, which we'll get to do some of that today. You see all these instruments around. Legacy projects, which is what I referenced, these keepsakes that patients can leave behind for their families. And creating therapeutic space. We talk about holding space in hospice a lot for our patients, especially when they're imminent and actively dying. Music's a fabulous way to hold space for people. And then, as a hospice music therapist, I'm also trained in doing terminal ventilator weans, which I'll talk about more later in the presentation. But those are some goals that a hospice music therapist can help patients and their families reach. So the biggest chunk of the music examples I want to share is this ISO principle technique. It has to do with entrainment. There are 8 elements of music. Some people say there are 9. Things like meter, tempo, rhythm, dynamics, lyrics, and so on. All of these things, live musicians can help entrain to the person's body, their breathing, their pace. Are they frantic and anxious, or are they super depressed? We meet them where they're at with their preferred music, and we bring them to a more desirable state. It helps if I show you an example. I walked in on our patient, Mary. For whatever reason, Mary's pain meds, she missed her last dose, and she was in the middle of a pain crisis when I showed up for the visit. She loves gospel music. She loves my visits typically, but I show up and her daughter's like, she's in a bad place. It's probably not a good idea to stay. Thankfully, the aide was there. He's like, no, this is exactly the time she should stay. Let her go. So I try and lock eyes with her because she's, flailing around, yelling out in pain in her bed. It seems counterintuitive, but when you think about it, when you're upset, do you really want somebody saying, honey, it's okay, shh, be quiet? No, you kind of want somebody to validate where you're at. Gotta lay down my burden, down by the riverside, down by the riverside, down by the riverside. Gotta lay down my burden, down by the riverside, and I ain't gonna study war no more. Maybe it takes a song or two to get her attention. Sometimes this process takes 30 to 45 minutes, a whole session, but it works almost every time. She's still not quite locking eyes with me, so I'm gonna keep the pick. I'm gonna keep it kind of frantic. I fly away, oh glory. I fly away. When I die. Well, there she is. Hallelujah, by and by. Hi, Mary. Right, so she's locking eyes. She notices I'm there. I'm just gonna keep on her. All right, but I'm gonna ditch the pick now that I got her. Will the circle be unbroken by and by, Lord, by and by? Eventually, I'm able to get her a little slower, just a closer walk with thee. Granted, Jesus is my plea, until finally, amazing grace, how sweet the sound. True story. She was asleep by the time our daughter finally got those meds ready. And she's like, I'm not waking her now. This is the most peaceful she's been in 2 days. And it does work. patients who are sundowning, agitated. I walked into a woman's home one time. She's very unsafely pacing her house, bending over, picking up invisible things. I'm playing her country music, real frantic on the ground with her, and I'm cornering her till she's dancing to her recliner, all mad. And then by the end, I'm, singing "Blue Eyes Crying in the Rain," and she's asleep on her, like, really uncomfortably on her arm, but she was asleep. And her daughter, who loved to use my visits so she could run to the store, came back and she was, "What did you do?" I was like, "Just did music." So it's super powerful. It works, like I said, in the opposite direction too. If a patient is in a depressive state, you don't want to, "Hey, perk up, let's, when the saints come marching in," but you want to meet them where they're at. Like, we self-musicate, right? Like, get in the car, going out to party, and put on hip hop, or maybe I'm feeling down, I'm gonna put on some Adele. So, like, this is the goal, right? We want to help people self-musicate if they can't get to the music themselves. And so, this is a really heavy story. I don't share it every time, but I think this is an important audience to share it with. Betsy was a patient of mine, and she had early onset dementia, as well as some other comorbidities that had her on hospice quite early in life. Her preferred music was 60s and 70s, kind of folksy and pop, Beatles, John Denver. I never really had, I would say, a very sensible conversation with her, even though we saw each other quite often. I would hear about the time the Oscar Mayer Wienermobile came by the Pope at the Vatican when she was there, and it was like some really entertaining stories, maybe different parts of her life in different contexts into one story. Could never quite tell. But one day, I'm 30 minutes into our session, and I just start singing, "I'd like to teach the world to sing in perfect harmony." And her affect changed, and she started shaking and crying. And clear as day, as a conversation like you and I would have, she recalled that was the song that her brother used to have playing when he would sexually abuse her. And this is what we call a trigger song. So as much as we, as music therapists and staff, assess in a clinical team what's going to be a trigger for patients, sometimes you just don't know, right? And so you have to have some kind of training and support for these patients. So thankfully, she lived in assisted living. I called her nurse over to just make sure she was physically safe and okay. I was holding her hands, I pulled out the Kleenex, and for a long time, I just sat there and validated her. Eventually, she stopped sobbing, and she was able to breathe more comfortably. Her tears subsided, and then I just started with a minor chord progression under her, right? While we just kind of sat in that space. And a long time later, still offering words of support, I finally started with one of her favorites. "When I find myself in times of trouble, Mother Mary comes to me, speaking words of wisdom, let it be." And again, another 45 minutes later, about as happy as we got that day was, "Here comes the sun, here comes the sun, and I say, it's alright." And she was okay. She got back to baseline. I got the nurse to help me escort her back to her room. I stayed in the building till I got a hold of her nurse, chaplain, and social worker from hospice. I waited till one of them came back and then left, and they took the appropriate protocol following that moment. But it was really intense. I share it to say, yes, the ISO principle worked. I didn't know what the heck else I could have done at that moment because I was the one who brought her to that space. But it was also a big breakthrough, we feel like, that she had with our team. And so I always caution people, use music carefully. Fortunately, a music therapist should have that training, right? But I love that nursing homes are able to put headphones on people and bring them more music now, but we do have to realize music can trigger feelings and thoughts and emotions that we may not be present to take care of if you just put headphones on somebody and leave. So we often do share stories like that specifically to advocate for, okay, but just know how powerful music is. So we'll move along to verbal processing. That's the ISO principle, and training with the patient's body using music elements, bringing them to a more comfortable state. So I'm sure you've all had the experience of music bringing you back to a certain time or a certain place. It makes you want to tell a story. Whenever I play, miss the Saturday dance, heard the crowd hit the floor, couldn't bear it without you, don't get around much anymore. What do you think patients say almost immediately? Ain't that the truth? I don't get around much anymore. And I mean, you can learn so much from patient in that one statement, you know, like, well, where'd you used to go? Who'd you used to go with? Is it somebody I can get a hold of that this person's missing, right? I can relay these things to the team. Oh, they suddenly brought up that they like this place. Is there a way for us to get them back there or to bring them something, right, from that place? You can learn so much from just one song where you can sit with people for weeks and have conversations and try to get to the bottom of something, but one song can bring them there. And you never know what song that's gonna be. But building a relationship with the patient through the music is the best way to do that for a music therapist. Engaging them in life review, which we know is slightly different from reminiscence. Life review gives people opportunities to witness or talk about the legacy that they've left, reminds them of the changes they've made in the world. And reminiscence is wonderful because then we can bring in their family members too, if the family is present. Either way, if the family's not, you still see this is helping with isolation issues, sharing their stories. When you do have people at the senior living communities who come out when you're visiting patients, then they start to share these stories, and it's really cool to see people engage in that way. Capability, showing patients what they're still capable of doing. This is one of my favorite aspects of music therapy. People can still engage in music, either passively or actively, no matter how far along in the dying process they are. And so for somebody even to realize, wow, I can still enjoy music. I can still get to a concert if that's the way they want to view it, whatever it is, they can still enjoy it. I really love when patients are able to rediscover that their fingers maybe still remember the keys when they put them on it. We have iPad music apps that make it really easy and just light up for people. Even the keyboard that I actually ordered for us, this is my old one. They will have like light up keys so people can follow along and still feel like they can play even if they aren't able to read the sheet music anymore. Showing people what they can do, but also giving people opportunities to share wisdom and knowledge. Professor Victor, he was assigned to my case and I met him and fell in love with him right away. He was a retired professor and he would have still been teaching had it not been for his physical debility. He was in his 80s, his mind was fully intact and all he wanted to do was teach somebody something, and I could gauge that from the moment I met him. And so he told me during the assessment that he was very proud of his work, and his dissertation was turned into a book. It was his first publication, and it was about music around the world music, and each chapter was about a different country and their particular traditions, culture, and how that influenced music around the world. So after our assessment, I went to the library and I checked out his book, and I committed to reading a chapter each week and having him teach me. I let him know that I was gonna do this. I said, I want you to be prepared to teach me. I'm gonna bring your book and I'll start with, first chapter. And then he told me what that chapter was because he had a copy of it. And so each week I'd read a chapter and I would bring an instrument from that culture and I'd prepare one song. So our first session was, this is a buffalo drum. And it's very cool. I actually learned with a patient who had Parkinson's that the guitar, for whatever reason, those kinds of vibrations just weren't enough to get him engaged. But I started accompanying a cappella songs with just this beat. My patient had Parkinson's, and he came to life in a way that we had never seen before. So I was glad Professor Victor, introduced me to this instrument through his book. Very powerful. When we talked about Africa, I brought in this kalimba, and some people are very skilled. This is an African thumb piano. You can pass it around because it's beautiful vibrations. Music therapists can play these things on people's backs and it's almost like a massage. You can do really cool things with a lot of these instruments. And then there are like virtuoso kalimba players, which is phenomenal to see. I've got to see them live before and it's mind-blowing, but I think I did like Michael Row Your Boat to Shore or something for Victor, and he appreciated the attempt, But that was a really powerful relationship that we built. And his wife, when he passed away, sent me a card that said, you know, all of the hospice team was amazing and allowed Victor to live at home and do the things he loved. But he always told me he felt like a capable human being when you came. And that's so powerful. Because I feel like at that phase of life, again, you don't feel like you have much power or much of anything to contribute anymore. And as a society, you know, attribution is a big thing that we desire, and productivity. Accessing memories, flipping the page. How many of you have seen Coco, Pixar? Oh, so the image there, this is what I call the moment Miguel decided to become a hospice music therapist. His connection with Grandma Coco. She, throughout the whole movie, is deteriorating cognitively and physically, and she's no longer speaking and recognizing people, so they think. And at the end of the movie, Miguel brings her a song that her papa used to sing to her, and she sings along every word. Maybe you've seen these Alive Inside videos, the videos where they put the headphones on people and they start talking and telling stories. There are a few thoughts that we have as music therapists. One of them, some research has shown that it's possible these lyric memories are buried deep in the hippocampus. The hippocampus is a spiral structure in the center of the brain. As the brain's deteriorating from the outside in, they think that perhaps those long-term lyric memories are filed away deep in the center of that hippocampus. Perhaps that's one of the reasons we see it. There's also something called the thalamic reflex. Now, music activates all parts of the brain simultaneously, which is really awesome because that means our patients, even with cognitive deficits, their brains are activated when they're hearing this music, feeling these sounds. Think about how important sensory stimulation is. It's one of the reasons music therapists are so valued in memory care units, right? But music doesn't have to be cognitively processed or understood to be enjoyed and felt. So the thought is that even though that frontal lobe that does the cognitive processing is activated, it doesn't have to be understood to go to that limbic system, which is the emotional processing system, where the thalamus is and the hypothalamus, the amygdala. People are still feeling the music and feeling how they felt when they listened to it, even if they don't understand where that memory came from or how that song is played or even who's in front of you. It can still be enjoyed. The moment I knew that I wanted to work in end-of-life care was when I was standing in the living room of the home of a family friend, and their 26-year-old daughter was dying. She was actively dying. She had a degenerative, cognitive issue at this point. I don't know what her other comorbidities were, but her brain was not functioning like a 26-year-old. And the family contacted me through a friend and said, Amber loves Christmas music. It's not Christmas, but we want the whole family to come by and surround her bed with Christmas carols. And will you come and lead that? And I wasn't even a music therapy student at the time. People knew that I sang, and it was something I love to do, and I love people, and I want to help. What can I do? And so they said her favorite song is Silent Night, but let's not do that one right away. So we sang all the other songs, and then her family said, okay, I think it's time for Silent Night. And no, she hadn't shown any signs of being responsive at all. But as soon as we started singing Silent Night, a tear rolled down her cheek. She didn't have to understand anything that was going on. In fact, she probably could not at all cognitively where she was in her disease process, but she felt it and she heard it, even though she passed away hours later. So accessing memories, allowing people to feel a certain way, even if they can't cognitively grasp it. Music therapy visits increase spiritual well-being. Walter, you can probably testify to this, right? You incorporate music in a lot of your visits, right?
When they let me.
Yeah, when they let you. I think music and spirituality go hand in hand. There's a particular study that I referenced there from 2007 done by a music therapy graduate student. She was in an inpatient center and she would see patients every week, but the 1 week she would incorporate music in her visits, and the other week she would just facilitate conversation around spirituality. In the pre and post test by the patients and or their families, they would report statistically significant higher feelings of spiritual well-being in the sessions with the music. I've had a couple really special experiences with team members, one being our chaplain. We would collaborate on a lot of visits, but one is most memorable. We have a younger patient who lived in a nursing facility, and she couldn't get out to church anymore, and the facility didn't really have the Catholic services that she was craving. And so it was Advent season. Me and the chaplain went once a week. The chaplain would set up her pine wreath and have the electric candles, and we'd light one each week. I did the Catholic music repertoire with her. She would choose the songs, we'd sing them, we'd have an appropriate church service. The chaplain would serve us communion, and then we would wrap up with our closing song. She found those incredibly meaningful and asked us to come even after the Advent season. And it was a really special part of our care with her as a team. Our other guy, Fred, he lived in this nursing facility. He was a former deacon, and he was so spirited. And during my visits, he would say, wait, I have to plan for an extra 30 minutes, because he'd go to every door in the facility and invite everybody out, because he was going to lead worship. And so we would gather, I'd get a whole bunch of instruments out. Good old Rose would go to her room and get her own tambourine, and Fred would, this is what we're doing next, folks, praise the Lord. And then I would just play. It was kind of in the background, just allowing him to have this moment. It became such a big thing that the staff, and they weren't really supposed to do this, I didn't report it to anybody, they started putting me on the calendar for worship at 3 or something with Fred. But it wasn't me, it was him they were putting on the calendar, which is sweet. But they're like, we can't schedule anything else, because if you're here, like, they don't want to do anything else. So that was a really special time that we had. And his wife would come, and she, of course, got wind of it after it started happening. I always call the families after, if that's something the patient and family want, and tell her, she's, girl, you gotta have me there next time. And so that was a really big part of her week too. So please use these instruments, okay? I've got a drum here, I've got some shakers, tambourine. This is kind of fun. The buffalo, anything's fair game, okay? We're gonna do a little active music making together so that you can kind of feel what it's like, see what it does. Oh, and I hope you sing too. Yeah, you got your toe and chime there, all right. Does anything look too unfamiliar to play? This is another cool adaptive thing that kids can't grasp. You can Velcro it to their wrist, which is nice. You don't have any real sensitivities to skin, do you? That's like a cowhide from Africa. I don't usually use it in patient sessions unless I warn people. All right. Hey, where did we go? Days when the rain came down in the hollow. Does somebody want to jump on the keyboard? I labeled just the keys with hearts. It should sound good no matter what you play. Do it down. In the midst keyboard. Oh, our hearts are jumping here. Brown-eyed girl. You're my brown-eyed girl. Get it ready, everybody. Do you remember when we used to sing la 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 la, just like that. Sha la 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 la.
I gotta do this every day.
Brown-eyed girl. You're my brown-eyed girl. Oh, thanks. I didn't even hear it.
We're having a concert.
Any special requests? Any songs you're dying to hear? What was it like to play?
Awesome.
Awesome. Was it a little uncomfortable too? I mean, I saw some people
No.
like, what?
I really wanted Dell to play the keyboard, but he wasn't having
Let's
it.
try it again.
so-
All right. That
I
works.
don't play keyboard.
No, this is the thing. I label them. I wouldn't want to touch it either if the keys were that yellow. This is 20
Yeah,
years
it's
old.
like,
I
I'm
was
not touching anything. I don't want to.
But we do. We set up people for success. So normally we would have done like a practice run with Dell on the keyboard, which I totally forgot to do. But you could see, I could see smiles, laughter. People were looking at each other like, am I doing this right? Is this weird? It's kind of fun. But you saw what it did. It creates opportunities for people to bond, or at least have a shared experience. It teaches families how they can interact with their loved ones. I can help them get instruments. I can help them create song, playlists in whatever form. They're still using CDs. Cassettes, I don't know if I can work out anymore, but you can find some if people only have a cassette, right? So teaching people how to use music at home, showing them what they can still do with their loved one, but also some music therapy sessions may just be sitting in somebody's home with their family and making music with the loved one. When I worked with Margaret, this was the case. Margaret, she had a stroke. She didn't have many verbal skills and abilities left. She had a full-time sitter who absolutely adored her and was very close with her and could kind of relay things to me. And her daughter was very involved, and her daughter loved music. And so she asked me if I would come every other week and that her daughter could be there. And the patient really, she didn't say much or do much the whole time, but she sat there with a smile in her chair, kind of raised up, watching me, her daughter, and her caregiver. At one point, she brought grandkids too. And we would sit on the floor. Her daughter would bring a new instrument each week. She was in a choir. She'd bring a new song. Sometimes she'd perform. It was kind of like our band. We'd practice with, Margaret watching, and then we'd do a little performance. And she really took a lot of joy in it. You could just see it in her face. And then as time went on, her caregiver said, you know what I'm noticing? She said, the day after you come, she's more alert. And there are studies that show this is the case because of the way that music affects the brain, and especially people who have cognitive deficits. So she's like, they want you to start coming every week. And so that's what we did. I started coming every week, and then they found for 2 days after her visits, she was more alert and engaged. So that does, it's a testament to how much different each music session may look with each person and their families, but that was a unique one. After Margaret passed away, her daughter had me and the caregiver over at her home for a kind of bereavement visit where we played some music in the living room and shared memories with the family, and that was really sweet. So the book, we have a few more slides to go, but these legacy projects I've been alluding to throughout the presentation are probably the most unique thing that I think a music therapist can bring to a hospice patient. Many of you know that families will say, I'm just gonna miss hearing their voice, right? I'm gonna miss talking to them, I'm gonna miss seeing them. I love the ability to be able to record somebody's voice for them, right? Especially if that person's musical, but even if they're not, you can do some pretty amazing things. The book did not come in time, unfortunately. I ordered it. I had a signed copy and lent it to somebody, but I met Clara during our first visit together, and I want to say that I have signed permission from all of these people to record and then share their projects. They're very proud of them usually and want people to hear them. When I walked in for Claire's assessment, now Claire had ALS. At this point she could still speak, but she used technology to kind of speak into her computer. She was so proud because she was writing a book, and the book is called Mom, You Peed on My Foot. And her 21-year-old daughter was her primary caregiver. It had only been them their entire lives. So this 21-year-old is losing her mom, and she's her caregiver in their home, and it's just them and the hospice team at this point in her care. And Clara said, I'm writing a book, and I want you to just see this page. It's from my Sydney, and that's her daughter. And the top of the page says Sydney Love. That's the heading for this page. And it talks about how Sydney's such a good caregiver, but she's having a hard time with this disease process. And, this whole story, this whole book that she's writing is based on her comment. The one time she saw humor in her daughter through this was when she's like, Mom, you peed on my foot. And they both laughed. And it was a breaking point for them. So she wanted this book to advocate for ALS support, to be a tribute to her daughter. Anyway, I was reading this Sydney Love page, and she's like, so tell me, what can you do for me? Are you gonna help me with my book? Are you gonna, why are you here? And I was like, I don't know, but when I see that page, I see a song. I was like, what? I'm like, give me a chance. Let me do something for you and see if you can use it. So the next session, I came to her. You've been with me on this journey since day one, talking in bed at night, sometimes serious, sometimes fun. It's heartbreaking for me, I can't take away your pain. You may not like it, but try to understand it. Oh, Sydney love, natural caregiver. Sydney love, with good bedside manner. You've helped me fight this fight. Now help others live their lives. I'm watching you, so make mommy proud. Oh, Sydney love. I'll spare you the other verses, but they were all her words. I changed nothing. So she heard it and she said, I want to make her a slideshow of us. So we spent the next several visits gathering pictures, lining up the song with the appropriate lyrics, sharing the project with Sydney at one point when she was ready. Also in Clara's time, because she lived a while, eventually she wasn't able to speak anymore and she was bedbound and she was still wanting to do projects. We did 3 of them. We planned her whole memorial with the chaplain. That incorporated music, of course. She did an advocacy video when she had barely had a voice left. She wanted us to submit it to Ellen, right, to talk about, you know, the new ALS platform here. Let's get this out there. Let's get some funding for it. And our social worker worked with the interdisciplinary team. In our like kind of Make-A-Wish Foundation, we had a foundation to make people's final wishes come true. They closed down a bridal shop and had a photographer come and get pictures of Clara and her daughter wedding dress shopping, since that was something they wouldn't be able to do in the future. So she took advantage of like every hospice service imaginable, came up with 3 dynamic projects, and her daughter has, you know, this slideshow with her personalized song using only her mom's words for life. Caroline is another patient of mine. She lived at home with her son and daughter-in-law. We're out in the garden one day playing that song, My Way. Maybe you're familiar with it, but Caroline was feminist before it was cool, okay? And she met with me every week, and she would just empower me and other women and just wanted to get the word out there. She's like, I've always done things my way. So when I'm singing that song in the garden with her, she stops at the end. She's like, Susie! That's the song I want on my funeral. And I was like, okay. And she's like, you know I always do things my way. And I said, well, then why don't you sing it at your funeral? Now, I knew her well enough at this point to be silly like that. And she's like, what do you mean? This is what I mean. So over the next several sessions, we recorded her singing My Way. I'm gonna skip forward because it's long and I want you to hear what she says at the end. The end is near.
And now the end is near, and my face will find a curtain.
She was kind of a loose cannon, so at the end she went off on a tangent. That's what I want you to hear.
My way, and more, much more than this, I did it my way. Regrets, I've had a few, but then again, too few to mention. I did what I had to do, and saw it through without exception. I planned each charted course, each careful step along the way, and more, much more than this, I did it my way. Yes, there were a time to I give up more than I just my way. I loved us. People remember. So, I mean, I'm remembering a lot of things, but those things just seem more important to how you live your life. Is the most important thing.
I share this with all my volunteers when they start, so they know what a difference people can make when you just listen to your patients. offer
Good or bad?
regarding, offered
Yeah.
to do something special.
But that's regrets. I've had a few, yeah. Too few to mention. I don't know about that. That's really along the way. I mean, I took jobs that I wasn't sure I could do. And then I did it well, and was appreciated and understood and made things better for other people because of that job. But, so there's satisfaction there, but the fact that I recognize that, I guess, if you get too involved in it, I was put here on earth to do or be something for someone, somewhere, somehow. I think if I did nothing right, I hope that I made my sons appreciate the women in their lives.
And so we got to burn those CDs for all of her grandkids and family. This is Sharon, okay. I'll tell you about her in a minute. But we got to burn those CDs for her family, and I actually got to be present for their family reunion. She asked me to come, so she did it live, the song, and then gave them the CD. And then when she passed, her daughter and son-in-law had our whole interdisciplinary team over for, well, her care team, for a breakfast, and we listened to it, and we honored her and shared stories. Very meaningful. Again, I think the more interdisciplinary support patients are open to, the more powerful it can be for them and their families. So I think as staff, we just need to be able to know and educate families